Hey everyone, so that was a perfect introduction. So thank you very much. It means I don't need to introduce myself. So this is my name, that's my Twitter handle, this is my job title. I'll explain why that job title is there eventually. But this is the story of my journey from working in a startup through to working now in an enterprise. And the reason I want to share this and share my experiences is that I'm hoping to inspire you, not by be inspired directly by me, but inspire you to speak to each other. And this has been mentioned already, use that hallway track, to have conversations with each other, to turn to the person next to you, not during the talk, but at some point, and ask them where they work and what their experience is like. Because that's how we learn. That's how we learn at DevRelCon. We learn by sharing experiences with each other and learning from each other. So that's why I want to share this. So my journey began at a company called Pusher, who are a London-based startup adding real-time functionality to web and mobile applications. And I was there twice, once for 2 years, a gap, the arrow, and then back to them again for another year. And I classed that as kind of their seed stage and then pre-Series A. From there, I moved on to Nexmo, Series D. We were acquired, which was a very interesting transition, and eventually by a company called Vonage, and we're transitioning, to definitely be part of that Vonage platform. The interesting thing here as well is that my journey, as well as getting older, which is shown by my sore back, I did some gardening the other day, and it's really aching. Plus I'm gardening, maybe that's another sign. Is that I've matured both in terms of age, but also in terms of experience and knowledge, hopefully. And I definitely think through the transition of these companies, yes, they were older, not always in terms of growth, in terms of age. Actually, Pusher and Nexmo are around the same age, but certainly the maturity within the organization and the drive was very different. So this is the journey. The approach I'm going to take is talk about those different scenarios, the different companies. For instance, the company itself, the funding, the number of staff, the years in existence, products, and et cetera. Then talk about goals and responsibilities. Yes, I'm going to talk about Arp, and I'll explain that it's not a funnel. Then I'm going to talk about the structure that we had to execute on those goals and responsibilities, and then provide advice. So in retrospect, if I were to look back at the time I had there and say to the company, what should we do? How should we do things differently? What things are working? And also as an individual, not just myself, but definitely to myself, but also the individuals on the team. So this first scenario is me working at Pusher. We were seed-funded $1 million. We had one product, and a product that caught the wave of kind of developer imagination. It was using WebSocket, which is still going through RFCs, quite difficult to get started with, but we'd provided a good onboarding flow to help people get up and running and seeing the magic of real time as quickly as possible. Only 7 employees and just kind of 1 year in existence, spun out of a digital agency. So the Arp goal. So Arp, I'll go through the acronyms. We've kind of seen this already, but awareness. Are we raising awareness of the platform or the product? Are we acquiring new customers to that platform or product? Some sort of sign up or registration? Are we activating them? Are they using the product in a kind of significant way? Are we retaining, so our customers staying on the platform or product beyond a given amount of time? Are we referring? So are we actually getting customers referring other customers? Are we getting revenue? And are we providing product input? So by product, I mean defining product, engineering product, gaining ideas, and making the product better. Okay, so our goals at Pusher, it was, as I said, a seed-funded organization. We're just trying to demonstrate to the investors and to the world, hopefully, that it's solving a real problem. So we wanted to raise awareness, we wanted to acquire new developers on that platform, and we wanted to improve the product. So if we look here, we've got tutorials for raising awareness and also great for acquisition, events the same, docs and server SDKs, obviously part of the product. You could say that support is very much part of the product. You can't offer a developer platform like Pusher without having support. And we also did some brown bag sessions, which were great for awareness and acquisition, specifically for digital agencies that we felt was a really good audience for us. And the team, it was 7 people, so it was small. I was the only developer evangelist in that year 1. But obviously it's a startup, so everybody is helping out with everything. So a little bit of everything. I was getting involved in updating the website, SDKs, documentation, blog posts, events, as were other people across the organization. So the learnings and advice to the company are, DevRel can definitely help because it can do many, many different things. It can be support, it can be engineering, it can be marketing, and it can be product. So many different things. It helps you reach a very wide audience, developer relations. It's generally focused on the developer. But the thing is, imagine on support, I wasn't just interacting with the developer, I was also interacting with other people dealing with payment problems and so on. And the thing with all of this very generalist approach for developer relations at that smaller company is it'll help you understand what works and what's required in the organization. This isn't just for developer relations, this is for other departments as well. We've got a lot of support. It means the person on developer relations isn't maybe doing blog posts and out at events or improving the SDKs. So let's bring in a dedicated support person. It can really help you learn what works for that organization. At that stage, and specifically there, I do think it was right to hire me. I would say that. I was a generalist. I wouldn't say I'm amazing at anything, but at the time, I was reasonably good at coding. I was okay at giving presentations. I was okay at giving, writing documentation, writing blog posts, and so on. And it really fulfilled the need of that type of organization and that type of product. So technologist, entrepreneurial as well. And obviously trustworthy. I think every hire should be trustworthy, but if you're sending someone out to be the face of that company within developer communities, you have to obviously trust them. We tracked signups. Again, it was the goal of that organization at the time. We wanted to see that sign-up ramp hockey stick as much as possible. So a lot of the work that we specifically did was aimed at that. Sorry, my badge that I won't say what's on it is rattling. Okay. So the advice to me as an individual, there's obviously a lot being asked of you. Now, again, it's a startup. There's a lot being asked of everybody within that situation. There's a lot of drive. There's a lot of pressure in some cases, although I think at that organization we didn't really feel it, which was probably a mistake. But there's then an opportunity to really be influential. So you're the face of the developer. You're doing lots and lots of different things. You're providing product input. You're writing the documentation. It's a massive opportunity. But you should also be rewarded for it. And this is something, again, I reflect on myself. I think at the time I was perfectly happy, but I should have been more aware of the value I was bringing to that organization and got more out of it. Stock options, salary. Depending on the organization, you need to make sure you're aware of your value and you're being compensated accordingly. Have a life. Now, that's quite an obvious one. I'm sure there'll be various talks about this, but I remember specifically being on the telephone as my wife's water was breaking with our first child, trying to make sure some T-shirts were getting delivered to an event. Now, I kind of chuckle at it now, but also I'm very embarrassed by it. It's a really bad thing. How was I prioritizing being on the telephone to get some T-shirts delivered when I should have been rushing my wife to hospital? It's difficult mid-water break, but after that, we should have definitely gone. This is one of my favorite. This is actually from in the Trampery at DevRelCon 2015, DevRelCon London, where I gave a talk on the ROI of developer relations. This is where Pusher did developer relations in green, didn't in red, and did again in green. So if signups are, and developer signups are a big thing, and it's an API platform, developer relations is a great way of doing that. That didn't directly coincide with me being there. Actually, the green uptick at the end started before I returned, but what it meant is when the company was focusing on developer relations. So as we move into Series A, we were profitable, which is a really unique situation for a startup. We only had one product, 25 employees, and it was year 3. The goals are awareness, acquisition, and product, but they're not anymore because what you tend to find is as a company grows, there will be specialization that takes place. And what you find within developer relations is often some of the product type of things, the engineering type of things are taken away. I think at SendGrid, the SDKs, for instance, moved out of developer relations into engineering. And that happened at Pusher as well. Quite a lot, we had a dedicated support team. We didn't do docs anymore. The focus was definitely on kind of more awareness and acquisition, the marketing side of things. So we were in marketing, although it was quite a small department. It was definitely a marketing focus. You can see the team there. But there was help across the company. We did things like Battle Hack by Braintree, PayPal, thanks to Cristiano Better, who invited us to get involved in that. And that was everyone across the organization, certainly a lot of engineers helping out there. So the advice is, the goal for the company at that time was awareness and acquisition. What we found worked for us was content. Content was great. Events, to some extent, things like Battle Hack were brilliant because of the media coverage that we got there. But really, we should have hired developer educators. Now, that job probably didn't exist at the time. It certainly does now, but we want developer advocates and evangelists and community managers that want to focus on creating content, so maybe developer educators. And then you need to work or have that team execute on great social and advertising, or work with marketing or growth to do that. And that content can also be great for activation as well. So, people are following tutorials and they're signing up and they're using the product, but also it can be good in like email activation campaigns. So, we can talk about a funnel. There is a funnel. We were trying to drive people through to revenue, and we could find out the indicators along the way. A level of activation would result in a decent level of revenue. So from an individual's perspective, you have to expect change. There's been growth, right? There's more people. There's specialization. That's definitely going to happen. That's an opportunity. It can be an opportunity. For instance, like if you don't like doing events, you can specialize in content. Like Steve, if you want to do more events, you don't have to do content. There's maybe a team for that. As the generalist, I needed to adapt or leave. Ultimately, it was the latter that happened. But looking back on it, there was an opportunity there to potentially grow a team. If I'd understood the company goals, understood what worked for that company, I could have said, right, let's build a team of developer educators. So that's a missed opportunity. So from there, I transitioned in March 2016 to Nexmo. The co-founder, Eric Nadelin, is at the back over there. So thank you for the opportunity. And it has been an amazing journey. So the scenario here is it's a much more mature company. So it's about the same age as Pusher, but there's $28.1 million investment, Series D. You can correct me on this. That's what Crunchbase says. 5 products, so more products, a lot more people, 150 people. As I said, around the same age, year 3, year 4. It was a different sort of organization as well. So Eric was co-founder with Tony Jimus, and Tony Jimus had the connections from the telco network. So we provide APIs for sending, receiving text messages, making, receiving phone calls. So he had that knowledge to get connectivity in place with these telco networks, and also the business acumen to know how to monetize that. He built a great sales team. We'd got lots of big-named companies. I hadn't heard of Nexmo, which was really interesting, but lots of big-name companies as customers. But then if you look through to the product, what happens there is so there's not developer awareness because it's a very sales-driven organization and there isn't a focus on the developer. And also from the product perspective, there's some experience improvements that can be made. So the goals there were awareness, acquisition, and product. And the interesting thing is that I think originally I was hired really because we wanted to raise awareness. Because during the sales cycle, the product would reach developers for an assessment, and developers would go, well, I've heard of this other company that does this same sort of thing, or the experience isn't quite right. So the goal was let's fix that so that when developers come along, they have heard of Nexmo before. The need for product changes and product improvements came along during the discussions. We worked out, well, we need some guaranteed API standards that we consistently follow across the product. Documentation needs updated. Libraries need to be brought in from the maintainers and improved and made a first-class part of that product. And I didn't know at the time, but I think one of the goals was to be acquired. And again, Eric can confirm or deny afterwards. But I think one of the things about bringing in a developer relations team and help accelerating signups can also help with that. One of the figures they will look at is, what is the acquisition rate right now? The structure, we were in engineering product because Eric led both product and engineering. 1 community manager by the end of that year and 5 developer advocates. So, again, a reasonable sized team. And one of the great things about this is we were a startup within a startup. We were empowered and enabled to do everything that we needed to do. We didn't. It's a good thing and a bad thing, and I'll talk about this in a bit, but we could do everything we needed to do without a lot of interaction with other people in the organization. That enables us to move very fast. So the lessons learned from a company's perspective, the need for awareness and the need for product with a team of 6 people means you spread yourself quite thin. I think if you're going to focus and prioritize, then maybe we should have decided to focus on the product first for 6 months or 12 months, get everything right there, and then move to start driving developers to adopt the platform. We could, as a developer relations team, we could have said, well, let's target a specific programming language community or a regional communities based on region or platform. We didn't. We tried to do everything. And we could have said, well, let's focus on content instead of events. It's just different ways of slicing and dicing, but by focusing, you will deliver more of that thing. That empowerment let us get stuff done, as I mentioned. But the negative side to that, and something we saw not probably in the first year and a half, but certainly kind of, there's still parts of it ongoing now, is that the team can become disconnected from the rest of the organization. That could be, alignment of goals. I don't think that really happened. I think we were always generally aligned in terms of goals. But one of the big things I found was culture. We're a team of developer advocates, community managers, technical writers. We care solely about the developer. The organization cares more about the developer and the business decision maker. Also, we're in our own little bubble, so we do things in slightly different ways. So there's definitely a cultural disconnect that we've seen that we're still working through remedying. And it's partly the company changing and partly us. The team is reasonably small, so everybody can have a say in everything. Now that's great, but certainly when a team gets a little bit bigger, you can't hear everyone's opinion on everything. Maybe there's different forums and mechanisms for allowing that, but certainly we got, at this stage, it was great that everybody felt absolutely part of everything because everybody could be involved in the conversations. There was someone called Tim Lytle at Nexmo who'd been there probably a year and a half, 2 years before I joined. And honestly, he was saying all the right things about what developer relations should do, but he was a lone voice within that company of 100 to 150 people. When there were more people in that team saying the same thing, it amplified his voice. So it enabled us to get things done. So that ratio of developer relations professionals versus the rest of the company was actually really important in allowing his voice to be heard. Expect change. You're not going to say Series D forever. So that obviously feeds into the next point where we were acquired. And I'd love to say this was the impact that the developer relations team had on the organization. It's a bit like the sign-up graph, but the New York Stock Exchange pricing. But obviously I work for an enterprise. There's a big disclaimer here, so let's make sure context isn't lost in that. So a very different organization. So Vonage is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's the first time I've ever worked for a publicly traded company. A lot more products, 2,500 employees and growing, and founded in 2001, like pioneers of voice over IP. But quite interestingly as well, around 8 acquisitions makes up that company now. So again, we're talking about, I mentioned culture earlier, but imagine bringing 8 different organizations into that enterprise and the different culture, ways of doing things. It's not a bad thing. You're bringing diversity, different ways of thinking, but there are going to be clashes. So we had lots of goals. Basically, now we do have lots of goals, and I'll talk about how we can execute on this. One of the new additions to this is, one, revenue. So we are tracked through to a figure. And what that is that's basically accounts that are unmanaged. They don't have an account manager. So they're accounts that are the long tail that may accelerate at some point. But also onboarding. So we took ownership of not the sign-up flow, but the point where there's a demo of a product, there's a copy and paste code example. And what we did there is we brought in an external agency, YLD. We were the product managers, YLD were the engineers, and we increased the activation rate of developers that signed up to our platform by 20%. So again, having that kind of DevRel mindset in product can really help activate more developers. So there's been a change, but so I actually gave this presentation in San Francisco. We were kind of a standalone department. We reported to the chief product officer, who became the API president. So that kind of moved us out of product into our own department. We did that combination of defining product, engineering the product. So we own our documentation platform, Nexmo Developer, which is open sourced. Looking after the SDKs, we do what we class as education, which is used for marketing purposes, but the ethos around it is to educate developers. It's not purely made for, is this going to drive traffic? Is this going to drive acquisition? Is this educational as a foundation? And yes, it will help with those things, but approach it as education. And community, things like this, so supporting this community and being part of it, but also the communities around the world that do align with business goals. And this was in July, I think, or June, we were 27 people, now from community managers through to product managers. So a multifunctional team. So lessons learned from a company's perspective. It can genuinely, certainly within Nexmo and then Vonage, it certainly affected change. We identified gaps in the product and either helped fill them ourselves or work with the product and engineering teams to help remedy those. It's not entirely fixed, but we're moving steadily and forward towards improving things across the board there. We need to educate across the organization. So as I said, Vonage is an enterprise. It was previously a voice over IP consumer-focused organization. There are 8 acquisitions there. A lot of these people, there are a lot of developers, but there's also a lot of people that aren't developers, and the organization has never really been focused on the developer as the customer. So we're continuing to educate internally around what the developer is and what they care about. So we are, I believe we're making positive change within the organization that people now much better understand the developer than they previously did. And that does feed into culture. We do internal hackathons and training sessions and so on. We still need to, certainly from an external point of view, segment business decision. And okay, there's much deeper dive personas, but certainly for journeys, we need to segment the business decision maker and the developer. I think that's really important. Different Twitter accounts, different journeys from marketing website, even within the marketing website itself, through to using the product. Because even, for instance, people that manage the account, manage number inventory and so on, they're not developers, they're more operational type people. So we need to understand how to segment our customer base. From an individual's perspective, this is Sarbanes-Oxley. So there's a lot of responsibility being involved in a publicly traded company. I probably should have had my slides checked as an example. Security and compliance obviously matters no matter what type of organization you're in, but specifically within an enterprise organization that's listed. And that can feel like something that gets in your way, but you need to make sure you understand the reasoning for these things. I've mentioned this kind of already, but it's really important to build relationships internally as well. So we can no longer do everything ourselves. We have to work with legal. We have to work with finance. There's lots of people around the organization that we now need to work with to actually get stuff done. So it's super important to build those relationships and explain what developer relations is. For instance, contracting for events, the contracts for events. There's an assumption at an enterprise level that it's a large entity that you're interacting with, whereas sometimes we're given a few £100s, a few $100 to a small community to support them. They won't have a standard contract in place to use that. I've already mentioned this. I think I've hit the point home already. I believe we've genuinely changed the organization as individuals, but also as a team. Something obviously to be aware at any point in your career is that you might not be in the right place for you right now. So if you enjoyed that empowerment, being entirely empowered to do everything, and you didn't want to work with finance and you didn't want to work with legal and other parts of the organization, then maybe an enterprise isn't the right place for you. We're still enabled to do a lot of stuff ourselves, but we do have to work with other people. So that's really important. It might not be the right place for you. And you do need to demonstrate value. Now, I know that Steve said metrics, we shouldn't be focusing on numbers. The thing is, the board are going to care about numbers. Now, if you've got leaders within the organization that support you and understand what you do, that's great. But ultimately, you're going to have to display some numbers that are showing a positive trend. There's no getting away from that. So where are we now? So we are moving to be Vonage. I don't have all the details yet, but we will be Vonage, and the next name will be going away. So rebranding, it's a new challenge, it's another change. We merged with the platform experience team, which is a product team. I mentioned the onboarding, that was kind of done as a side project, but we now are responsible for the dashboard, for internal tooling to enable support, to provide better support to our customers, and the end-to-end experience on the platform as well, the different touch points, the different assets from a product perspective. And we are continuing to grow and continue to specialize. So as I mentioned, we're now platform and developer experience. We still do all of these different roles. We're still a multifunctional team. And this is everyone we have at the team, on the team right now. So again, from including product managers through to developer advocates. So we're definitely seeing more and more specialization in that team. And I think to scale, you have to do this. You have to build teams that can focus on doing one thing well, with variety, obviously with variety, but doing one thing and doing one thing really well. So, in summary, expect change. There's only one constant, expecting change. It's definitely the case. As things grow, things will change. You have to have that mindset. And change management is a whole other topic. I haven't been great at it. I'm learning. So if you're going to go through this sort of transition, it's important to understand how to embrace and take opportunities from that change. Focus and specialize, I've already mentioned that. And it's important to put developer relations within a department that has supportive leaders. So even if your goals are more marketing orientated, for those people, those technologists, it might be better to have them in product or engineering because the leaders within that org better support that team and understand them. Or align with department goals if you have that support. Keep experimenting and demonstrating business benefit. You have to. We all need to keep demonstrating and showing business benefit. So that's time for me. Developer relations is evolving. You're at the right place for this. We're sharing experience with each other. Please take what I've said, think about it. I could be wrong, but at least let it start a conversation in the hallway track. So have a great time at DevRelCon, and thank you very much. And now go and see Lorna in the documentation track. Thank you.